A few years back, Lies of P came out of absolute nowhere to be my personal game of the year in 2023. 2 years later, Round 8 Studio has returned with Overture, a $30 expansion that sees the team revisit one of the more surprising hits the Souls-like genre has had. Let's see if they can replicate the magic that led the original to being a FromSoft level experience. First things first, while I would recommend the original to basically anyone who enjoys the genre or even has a mild interest in it, Overture is not going to be for everyone. This is meant to be an endgame experience that steps the difficulty up even compared to the end of the base game. A solid build is not only helpful but damn near required, and this content is very much meant to push even people who have beaten the game and nearly maximized every progression system. If that doesn't sound like your cup of tea, you might not enjoy Overture. If that sounds fine, let's carry on. Lies of P Overture sees you jump back into the shoes of Geppetto's puppet, who finds himself seemingly sent back in time to before the puppet frenzy in the events of the original game. After getting your bearings, your goal is to meet up with the legendary stalker and prevent the tragedy that led to the main game from taking place. Story-wise, Overture is surprisingly pretty interesting. It doesn't go overboard on lore dumps and keeps things at least somewhat personal and easy to follow. The alchemists are bastards, you and the legendary stalker are trying to thwart their plans. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it was refreshing to see the game focus on characters with more direct and parsable motivations. The atmosphere continues to be top-notch, as the destroyed and dangerous areas tell the story of the world without any dialogue. A zoo with mutated monstrosities breaking out of cages, a carnival of maniacal puppets, these are things that speak for themselves. The environments are varied, interesting, and for the most part distinct compared to the main game. I love the snow theme. I honestly wish there was even more of it because of how beautiful it looks, but I understand the need for visual variety as you visit caves and interior spaces. The best parts about the story, and maybe the entire expansion, are the brief NPC interactions. Obviously, considering the DLC is only about half the length of the base game, there's not as much time to tell full-fledged stories like the one involving Antonia and Eugenie. Instead, there's short but extremely memorable NPC quest lines that add a ton to the already fantastic atmosphere. There's a fisherman next to an inexplicably massive catch who just wants a beer, a trapped man in a cave with an ending I won't spoil. They're only a few minutes of the 10 to 12 hour runtime, but man do they stick with you. The main focus of the expansion though is the new levels, enemies, and bosses. The level design is a step up from the already solid main game. It's not a massive jump or anything, but levels feel bigger and more expansive. I found myself getting lost pretty frequently, and I mean that in a good way. The distance between checkpoints is a bit larger than the base game as well, as the game aims to challenge you despite assuming you've maxed your pulse cells. There's a lot of non-respawning mini-bosses that allow you to make progress even if you don't make it all the way to the checkpoint, and these mini-bosses are often placed right in front of shortcuts as one final test. It captures that feeling of anxiety and being pushed to your limit that makes levels great in the genre. The game also uses encounters with multiple enemies far more often than the main game. The trick is that most of these can be worked around. You're encouraged to play slow, check your corners, and use some expanded long-range options to grab aggro from single enemies. Assume a constant state of danger. There's a few little problems here though. In more confined spaces, the camera can be an issue. There's also a lot of instances where your weapon will hit off a wall in ways that feel unavoidable. The arenas can just sometimes be a bit too awkward to fight in. These aren't major issues, but it does lack polish in some areas. The new bosses are... Okay, so I hate using the term mixed bag. The bosses themselves are brilliantly done, with interesting movesets, memorable designs and themes, and they all do a fantastic job of forcing quick and meaningful decisions. The balance between blocking, dodging, and parrying was always the best thing about Lies of P to me, and figuring out which parts of a boss combo to use which tool on before you finally figure out a tough fight is intensely satisfying. That was true in the base game, and that's mostly true here. Unfortunately, there are a few issues. There's a few bosses with massively inflated health pools to the point where they aren't fun to face. It's like chopping down a tree. Then there's the final boss, which can either be an odd sort of cinematic story fight or the hardest thing in the game by a country mile depending on your choices. It took me 6 or 7 attempts just to figure out how to survive its opening combo, and at times it's so aggressive it makes Orphan of Kos look like Taurus Demon. It's either overtuned or undertuned depending on what you want to do, and it's not exactly a bad fight, but it's an odd finale when a more traditional boss fight might have been more appropriate. The devs have already stated they're going to make some adjustments to the difficulty, so these things might be fixed soon. But for now, these hiccups with the bosses sour an otherwise great set of challenges. The result is, as I stated earlier, a DLC that won't be for everyone. This should be considered challenge content, something meant to push even seasoned players as far as it can. This can sometimes be at the expense of a more balanced and fluid experience, but if that challenge is something you're looking for, this expansion is going to be an all-timer for you. I personally enjoyed it, but I also managed to avoid getting really stuck on any one boss for a long period of time. And I've seen horror stories that suggest I might be in the minority on that. Getting stuck on one of the bosses with an overinflated health pool probably would have soured my entire expansion experience, and that's always going to be a possibility for people jumping in. Most of the bosses are tightly designed enough that even beating your head against them for hours will feel pretty fair, but the exceptions make me wary of giving a blanket recommendation. The game did add difficulty options to help players who get stuck, but the idea of lowering a difficulty in a Souls-like sounds so wrong that I just viewed it as a cheeky taunt from developers to players who can't push through. There's also an issue that should be mentioned in that the game requires you to be at Chapter 9 in the main story to start. This means if you've started a New Game Plus run after finishing the game, you'll have to make it all the way back to Chapter 9, and then play the DLC on the harder New Game Plus difficulty. It's a bit of an oversight considering I think jumping into a new playthrough to see what it's like is something that was pretty common for people when they beat the initial game, and the DLC is very clearly balanced for people who have seen the credits. I don't necessarily want to over-focus on the flaws because this is for the most part a fantastic experience. It's perhaps a bit unfair because of how high the bar was set by the base game, but I want to stress that Overture meets and often improves that standard even with my complaints. They're worth mentioning, and Lies of P is so damn good that they stand out a bit more, but this is a genuinely great expansion overall. Lies of P Overture is probably not going to be as universally loved as the base game. It's hard as hell, sometimes frustrating, and has a few bits lacking polish. But if you're the type of player who wants a challenge or wants to jump back into the rich atmosphere of CROT, Overture is brilliant. The new levels are memorable and sprawling, the bosses have interesting and challenging movesets, and as a whole it masterfully captures the Souls-like hook of pushing you right up to your limit. It's also more than worth the $30 price tag in terms of length. There's a lot of new content here. For the right type of player, this might be the best release of the year. Just know what kind of gauntlet you're getting into. Noisy Pixel gives it an 8.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching, remember to subscribe and stay tuned to Noisy Pixel for more news and reviews.
Noisy Pixel.